la 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 la. Woo!
You've been doing such fun sounds with our little dancey intros
Mm.
lately.
Sound is release. It's amazing. It's so healing.
It is. It is. It is. It's needed today. So today we are going to be using the power of our voices here, as we always do, to speak
Always.
out about what we perceive as real, right? Bring some
Mhm.
more information and perspectives to people. So, just in case you've not been here before, this is the Inner Tapestry Series where we talk about things related to humanity, blueprints, cosmic patterning, all that good stuff. And today we are here to talk about the most current and recent event that is on our hearts, which is the 2024 US election. And what's next? What comes next for us now that we have landed in where we're landing?
Yep.
And we're going to move forward with what is. So, how do we do that? So, Red, if you would be so kind to introduce yourself to our audience.
Well, thank you all for joining. My name is Red MoonEagle. I'm a psychic catalyst, a teacher, and a healer. And we're going to go back to catalyst a couple times today. Um, but change is afoot. Chaos is here. And let's talk about it. I'm all
Oh,
about this.
yes. And just in case you don't know me, I'm Safrianna and the Queer Spirit Guide. I'm a licensed trauma therapist, a healer, and a teacher of some time. And I am here to try and shine light on the impact that we have on one another. And that's what's really, really heavy on my heart right now is the impact that we're having on one another. And, as we've landed, we have our new president elect who has been our president elect before. Some people seemingly loved what he did when he was in office before. Some of us didn't. But we survived. We got through it. And, we then had another presidency that kind of was status quo and, you know, kind of an average presidency. And now we're entering a chapter that truly is unprecedented in
Mhm.
many different ways. Many different ways. And so I have some concerns. Most of the people that I know, love, trust have some concerns. And there are also this wide swath of people who clearly thought this was the way to go. So, all right, what do we do with that?
Well, I love that question. What do we do with that?
What do we
I
do with
think
that?
probably one of the big things that I've said a couple times in conversations is we have to not be in fear. And there's a lot of fear. There is a lot of, and it's genuine. I
Yes.
do not want to diminish any of those emotions on both sides. There's sides of fear of what the other, and I'm going to use that word loosely, other will do on either side. Okay. And it's important that if we shame, fear, trigger disappointment constantly with all of the others, no matter what side you're on, we are going to stay in this loop and the divide will only get larger.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of the things that I've talked about. I posted a status after I received the news that got a lot of traction. Like a lot of people were liking it and reposting it and sharing it in their posts. And it was essentially, I see we chose the catalyst timeline. And somebody commented, well, both paths would have been catalysts. And I was like, absolutely. But this is the more bombastic, volcanic catalyst timeline. And here is the key difference. And I want to speak to it because of the fear piece, which
Yes.
is that this path, our new president elect, leaves all of the same people who were already feeling scared and marginalized, feeling more scared and marginalized. Whereas the other president option would have left those groups feeling more safe and more grounded. And then the rest of the groups, maybe, I don't think the physical safety thing is the same there at all. And that's a whole other topic. But we chose the path where we're continuing to protect white people over, and specifically white straight people and families, traditional families, and Christians over all other people. And that doesn't set well with me because no one is free until everyone is. And the biggest argument that I've heard from people who did vote Trump in, I understand, which is the economy is on frickin' fire. I hear you. We're all being impacted by that right now. Every single one of us is being impacted
Oh
by
yeah.
that right now.
Oh yeah.
And when you actually look at the policies, that's not what his policies are. They're not going to help the economy for the people who think it's going to help them. And that's where I'm like really struggling is we're all starving right now, essentially. We are all grappling to survive. And the promise that was made was essentially you and your families, white people, straight people, will see the benefits. And that is assuming that you're making over $360,000 a year. There's the kicker. So
Right.
I know most of the white people I know personally and am in relationship with are not making over $360K a year right now. So they are in a bracket that I don't know that they understand they're not going to be included in. Also, hi, Jess. I'm so glad you're here.
You know, one of the other things I saw your post about the catalyst part and I giggled. I went, hee hee hee.
I figured you would.
I did. I couldn't help it because my whole life, I have a life theme of the catalyst life theme. I am the person who walks into a room and I drop the catalyst energy. I I really can't disassociate from it. It is with me. It's like a miasma. For the first part of my life, it felt like this miasma of constantly triggering people. I walk into a space and I just trigger every single person in the space. And there was a lot of confusion with that. And also a lot of just being hurt and not understanding why my thoughts, my opinions, my beliefs, my desperation to have equity and equality in the world was so radical.
Yeah.
And as I grew up, as I got older, that conversation became part of our paradigm. Like when I stepped into the social work master's course last year, I went, oh, sweet. There's actually classes where we're talking about this in an open, educated way and nonpartisan, non like divisive, but more inclusive with language of understanding the disparities and the biases that we carry. Now, and I'm going to say this, I'm a pasty white chick. Okay. I'm a pasty white chick. And if you made the assumption when I talk about my husband that I'm straight, or you make the assumption if I don't say that I'm alternately spiritual, you probably wouldn't know. If I didn't say that I was in the queer genre of identification, you probably wouldn't know. If I didn't explain that I am of a mixed race heritage, you probably wouldn't know that. Do you know I'm poor? Like, I'm poor. I mean, I've lived in my car a couple times. Everybody's like griping about people living in their car. I've done it twice because I didn't have a choice and way
Right.
before it was popular. Like, we make assumptions, and I've lived the paradigm of being the catalyst in a room of assumptions my whole life. And it wasn't until probably about 10, 15 years ago that I just threw my hands up into the universe and went, fuck it, universe. I'm just going to be the catalyst. And when I did that, ironically, it started to make more sense. And obviously, from my psychic catalyst title at the bottom of my name card here, I've embraced it. And I've embraced it with more understanding the more I've lived in the world, especially since the dark time, especially since the integration of the bio numbers and having a language to explain it, because that's part of what people miss. They make assumptions because they don't have all the pieces. They've never walked that walk. If you've never experienced it, you don't know what that is. Am I going to understand what a Black woman's experience is? No, absolutely not. Never been there. I'm not going to understand what that is. Am I going to understand what a Mexican immigrant, an indigenous Native American Mexican coming across the border fleeing Venezuela in a dictatorship? Am I going to know what that is? Nope. And can I have compassion? And can I have an understanding that they have fled persecution, that they have traveled across many countries to arrive here with this idealized hope that people still have in the world, that America is a land of promise and hope. And I can have a great deal of compassion for those people, because all of my family's immigrant, except the indigenous part that was here before, right? All of them are immigrants. And my ancestors contributed to the decimation and genocide of an entire populace of people. And I am watching in real time those descendants of colonizers and descendants of immigrants from the indigenous people of Mexico continue to contribute to the idea that we're a land of promise, when we can't hold up that sign. We cannot hold up that sign because we are constantly still othering each other.
Yeah.
I've argued for years, like I'll never become part of a political party. I can't, because as soon as you belong to a political party, you have now othered someone.
Oh, that is, I just want to leap into that for a second because it's so heavy on my heart that when we had the opportunity to be compassionate, none of us really did. I'm talking collectively, right? I know
Yep.
individuals who did, but on the collective whole, very few chose compassion as the route. And there was this heartbreak that I experienced because I somehow got on both the Democrat and Republican presidential campaign emails.
I did too.
Not quite sure how, but I was opening them for a while until I unsubscribed, and the emails were almost identical. And it really was just, the other side's going to do this to you. The other side's going to do this to you. Be in fear, because if you don't vote us in, there's going to be more fear. And I will still argue, based on all of the data that is out there, that there would have been less fear with one selection over another. But again, we're here. So I got to accept that. And how did we get here? We got here through playing the us versus them game for freaking ever.
For a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been that way. I mean, you have to really go back to the beginning of how people colonized the United States. I mean, people think of the Puritans came to the United States to get away from religious oppression. Well, okay, I'll go with that for a teaspoon of that. But a lot of it was, I want to get away and do what I want to do.
Right.
And it was a lot of, I don't like you. I'm othering you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come here and now other someone else who's lesser than me. And that continued over and over and over again. And I do believe in many of the principles of our Constitution and our amendment rights. I really do. There are many of them that I fundamentally agree with, because in many ways, there is an inherent idea that there is a separation of church and state. There is an inherent acceptance that eventually it will all be equal. And I don't know about you, but I went through civics class assuming that as a woman, I had equal rights to a man. And I kept going, now I keep getting told that in civics class, but that's not what's actually happening in the world. And that's not what's happening to my brown brothers and sisters. It's not happening to my indigenous brothers and sisters. It's not happening to a whole slew of people with disabilities. Like, the assumptions that come with our bias continue to help media in general and the party system feed into the othering of other people. I'm part of a population of people that has been bullied a lot. I mean, a lot. And maybe you've never been bullied. Maybe you never experienced that. I mean, I had never experienced workplace bullying until I experienced it in 2013 and 2014. I was absolutely horrified. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, this actually happens to people. And I didn't even know it was happening to me until I fell apart. And it was an eye opening experience. We should not all have to go through severe trauma to be compassionate, that can be a thing that happens.
I know. I know. And one of the things that I always say is like there is enough suffering in the world from just health related crises and natural disaster for us to
Right.
have plenty of suffering to source from and have enough
Yeah.
shadow and conflict and all of that. And yet we don't. And yeah, I want to read Sarah's comment here. She said, America is a culture of exile and supremacy due to deep wounds that were brought in when colonizing the Americas. Yeah. And
Yep.
we're seeing these wounds continuing to play out in real time. And a large swath of people, if you look at the statistics from this vote, a large swath of people who are willing to turn a blind eye to that continued history. And it's like just flabbergasting because I think it's our responsibility to get a wider view. Like, I don't every time that there's been a candidate for any party, I do my research on them and I dig in and I look at things and one only needs to look minimally to find a laundry list of issues
Right.
from who we just voted in, like a real laundry list. And this is something I want to speak to because I want to speak to this in every freaking industry. There's a narrative right now of like, well, don't talk bad about him. We're not talking bad about people who are doing measurable harm by bringing forward that measurable harm and pointing it out. And I'm working on an article right now that is talking about the healing industry and the gaslighting and spiritual bypassing and don't look there that happens in that industry. But this is a cultural issue of turning a blind eye to things and being like, well, we don't have those kinds of conversations here. We don't call out the issues. Grandpa, Grandpa Bob is problematic, but we don't talk about that because he's family. And like that kind of feeling here is like this, well, he's a white man, so he's family, so we're gonna no, absolutely not. And that's my issue right now.
Yeah, and it's endemic. It's everywhere. There's no place that it's not seen. Um, and it's where, ironically, I think the neurodivergent population stands and shines. Like, we intrinsically recognize the inequity of allowing those behaviors to continue. Um, the other thing about this disparity is the assumptiveness of each of the other sides, right? Like, you and I are curious people, Safriana. We go out and we go. One of the beautiful things that I was very excited about with the League of Women Voters is they nationally supported 411.org. And every single League of Women Voters group was assigned to go out to every single candidate and ask them 2 or 3 questions about whatever the issues were, whatever their stance was, and post it. And in the state of Montana, across the board, none of the Republicans replied.
Hmm.
I went to 411.org to be able to get a nonpartisan or partisan, depending on how you want to look at it, but I wanted to see every single candidate's view on these questions. I couldn't find the Republican answers. They weren't there. And well, not all of them. There were a few Republican ones. I can't say across the board. That's like a blanket statement. But there were a lot more liberal, independent, and Democrat responses than there were Republican responses. So then I'm curious. I'm like, well, I would like to know the answer to that question. There were 3 people that I remember. I spent 2.5 hours with my mail in ballot researching. Because I didn't know who was on the ballot. First
Hmm.
off, I struggled to find where that was listed. 411 had them listed, but I didn't know where to look until I knew where to look. Then, and that's a problem with the website. Trust me, I've sent in emails because I have concerns. It should be easy, not hard. And I never did find answers to some of my questions on people that now have been elected into office. And my questions are genuine and sincere. I would really like to know what your stances are on these things. Why are you not providing that to me? If I'm supposed to make an informed decision, I'm going to do exactly what I recommend everybody to do. Go do your research. I'm not going to listen to the news media. I'm not going to listen to what people think these people believe in. I want to go read their thoughts. I want to watch, if I can find it, if I can find them saying what they mean and meaning what they say. I mean, there was one in one party that I watched 2 separate videos and they said opposite things. And I went, well, I'm not going to vote for you because you don't make any sense.
No congruence.
And they weren't Republican. They were in this other category. So we're doing what humans do best, okay? We as spiritual entities coming into a human meat suit, we filter everything through our bio number, okay? Everything's filtered through that bio number. So if that bio number is triggered in fear, you're going to go to where your bio number fear place is. And when you get a group of people that all don't want to be left out of anything, they're going to go in the direction of the path of least resistance. I always think of it as like water. Water is going to go to the one crack in the wall and grow mold. And as a group, they call it herd mind in some places, you know, as a group, we rely on somebody else to have done our work. And I'm not shaming anyone with this statement. I am not despairing anybody. I'm not pitying anyone with it. I am acknowledging these are human behaviors. And I grew up with a father, my papa, who actively discouraged herd mindset. I was very blessed, and I know that. Not everybody was blessed with that.
Yeah.
And so instead of pitying someone and disparaging them for their choice, my perspective is, okay, you've made a choice. You've elected the orange Oompa Loompa. Great. Awesome. Okay. Now, I'm going to hold you accountable for that. So if your ideals align with equity, with justice, with diversity, with equal rights for men and women, if you truly believe that anybody in the queer LGBTQ other brown community, if you really think that they deserve a voice, and you thought that the orange Oompa Loompa wasn't going to harm anybody, if you really think that you can hold to those values, I'm going to hold you accountable to that. I don't know that you're not going to turn me in.
Yeah.
But I'm going to hold you to it loudly.
That was my question, is like, okay, if you are claiming you've made this, you cast this vote for the reasons you cast this vote, for the economy, which again, still questions about that based on my research of math and whatnot. But anyway, whole other thing. If that's really why you voted, and that's the sole reason, and you really are here for people like me that you claim are your friends, you are the first person I'm going to expect to speak up if this goes the way that the people who are afraid right now are afraid it's going to go.
Yeah.
And so that's that holding people accountable, because there's lots of people in the world very excited right now about this outcome. And I really want to believe and hope that a majority of those people are really just excited because they think that this is going to lift them out of poverty and end that suffering, and that it has nothing to do with how they feel about others.
Right.
Because I've built a whole brand on uplifting the others. Like, that's what I'm here to do. And that's my number one value. And that means also uplifting people who might be uninformed, or uplifting people who might not know better in something, to give them the chance to see another perspective. And if they don't want to see another perspective, then I know that they're not the kind of person I'm going to be friends with or have a relationship with if they can't see a nuanced side or make space for other people's fear. And We need to not give in to fear. It's like this really
Yeah,
complicated.
it is complicated. And I think there's some nuance here, right? Like there's this knee-jerk reaction from those of us that are in the other category. We are in the other. And it would be very easy to make the assumption that voting for the orange Oompa Loompa means that you are for othering others. You are for oppression. You are for racism. You are for sexism. You are for taking away all rights, free speech. You know, there was an article I was reading several months ago, and it was about gun rights. And there's an assumption that everybody who voted for the orange Oompa Loompa is a gun activist, right? And we know from the numbers that's probably not a true statement. And can you support the Second Amendment, the right to arms, and also be supportive of minority groups? And it was a very interesting article. You get to the end of the article, they don't tell you their answer. They don't tell you their opinion.
Go think about this.
They just want you to think about it because we're not deeply thinking about things. We are reacting because we are reacting due to our own trauma responses.
Yep.
And one of the things that came up in a conversation that I want to write about a little bit is social workers, counselors, medical professionals, firemen, EMS, police department, your local constabulary, your local DPHS office, your food stamp office worker, your social security person that sits in the social security office who already has a lot of bureaucracy, poor things. And all of these people that provide social community services. I am not talking about the perception of generational welfare families, which, by the way, is a complete myth. They have proven that. We'll put a pin in that for later. What I'm talking about is public servants, not the elected officials. I'm not putting them on this pedestal. These are public servants. These are your secretaries when you go in and get your driver's license, right? I'm talking about the worker who is fixing the pothole in your neighborhood road, right? Like these are public servants. There are a variety of public servants. There are assumptions. You're garbage man, public servant. Hello. Public services are things that we take for granted. Has anybody paid attention to the poor water district person who is fighting tooth and nail to make sure your teeth don't fall out of your children's mouth because you're paranoid about fluoride? That's a thing. Everybody's got these issues, right? Like, I have an issue with this. The government. Okay. What we've done is we've said all of those public servants belong to the government. We have othered them. We have pushed them into a corner, and we have pushed them into a place that whether they voted for the purple Oompa or the orange Oompa Loompa or not, we have now lumped them in a rock and hard place position. Because how are they going to provide equitable and diverse services for everyone when the paradigm is to be afraid of everyone? We're looking at this macrocosm of othering in party lines, and we have not done our homework, and we have not fixed our local communities. We have not created community locally. How the hell are we supposed to have a federal local alignment to the people that are actually living the lives when we don't do that locally. It
Yeah.
was actually something that I've been chewing on for months, and I haven't really understood how to bring it up. So I'm just going to start at the beginning and hopefully it makes sense. But I have a question. When you vote for your local city councilor, have you ever met them?
Mm, I have not. I have
Have
met
they?
senators, but I have not actually met local, like local
Okay.
local.
Yeah, local. Like your local ward, your local district, whatever. I haven't. Never seen them. They've never come to my door. I've never seen a poll on social media with my local Facebook city page. I have never I've never been polled for anything, which it boggles my mind. Like statistically, I would have been polled for something along the way. Nobody wants my opinion. I'm a catalyst. I accept this. Um, because my catalyst energy is so radical all by itself, right? The universal polls go, whoop, nope, we ain't stopping there. But this is a genuine question. We have all the technology. When you go to a job, I'll use a local company to Montana. They're like one of the biggest gas station companies in the state of Montana. They poll their employees. They might not pay attention to the poll, but they poll them all. They ask them questions, they send out questionnaires. They're constantly getting feedback. What they do with it, who the hell knows? But they're at least asking. It makes the employee feel like at least it's going somewhere, right? Like your voice is being heard. A lot of big companies, they ask questionnaires. Now they're supposed to be like anonymous, you know damn well they're not. But at least they're asking, right? My local reps don't ask me shit,
Yeah, makes you wonder why.
right? So if the culture locally is not to be involved, oh, we don't want to involve the moms because they've got kids. We don't want them to come to a public meeting because they have kids. Oh, we don't want to hold any kind of educational things during the evening when parents could come. We don't want to do anything in a central location like at a school where everybody could come to because their kids come there. No, we're going to hold it on the other side of the county in a random firehouse that nobody knows how to get to. Why? Okay. So that's the first question. Then my second question is, if the local city council people and the local reps that you're voting for don't ask you questions, they don't want to know what you, the populace, actually want and need because they think you're too dumb or you're too busy, right? What happens at the county level? Well, again, I've never seen one of them. I've never met them. I've even gone to places they're supposed to show up and then they don't show up and they send a secretary, which baffles me.
Oh my word.
People
Having
say,
worked in
well,
a senator's office, that actually makes sense.
right?
That's a whole other story.
And then you go to state level. And this is the next question. They tell you in all the social media, Safi, you've seen it. Call your senator, write to your senator, be involved, right? Do you know how many letters I've written? We don't even need to go there. We could
Yeah,
probably,
no, I've signed so many petitions and
right. Why aren't they coming and why isn't it an open forum before they're elected? I want to know who they're actually representing and where is their money coming from, because I can tell you that it's not just state senators that are getting money, it's the local people too. But logic tells me that, not proof, because I haven't been able to pin anybody down to ask a question. If you go to a city office, I guarantee you any time of the day they're busy and out to lunch. I've had that happen a few times. Random days, random times of the day.
I mean, when I worked in a senator's office, I never met him until after the internship was over, and I was getting the opportunity to say hello to him and shake his hand and take a photo. Like
These are
the
not
hands
gods.
that no, they're so hands off and so circling back to the very beginning of I think part of where we were going with this is this there is no external savior coming to fix it for you.
No.
No one that you elect, right? Yeah, like I have my opinions about who may have been better for the future, but at the end of the day, neither of them are going to fix all the fundamental problems as an individual, right? And so we have to do our due diligence to stay informed, to own our impact, to have conversations, to create community. And it's really funny. I've been living here where I presently live for a year now, and I've never introduced myself to the neighbors because I didn't know if we were going to settle here. And now I'm like, it's time. I need to go because we've decided to settle here, first of all. But second of all, like, we need to know who our neighbors are and see them as real human beings, not just whose flag did they fly outside their house.
No.
Because, again, like when we actually start to have the real conversations, for the most part, people are just ignorant. They just
Yeah.
didn't know that this was what things were going to look like. They just didn't dig deep enough because they've never been invited to. They've grew up their whole lives hearing, like, just listen to the authority. Just listen to the authority. God's got you, or your teacher or your coach or your parent or whoever. Like
Right.
they've got the answers. So that's okay.
Well, we're also told that community is church. And I'm going to poke a big ass hole in that. I'm not Christian, never will be Christian. You're not going to put me in that hole. I challenge you to put me in any hole, actually, because I'm not sure I fit. But overarching, there's a dynamic, and there's actually what I call well, they'll call themselves this, but I'm going to say it as well: recovering fundamentalist preachers. And they'll say, like, the whole paradigm of being against any kind of social services with conservative Christian groups is that they want the church to be the savior, so it gives them an opportunity to gain membership. And so it's not just introducing yourself to your neighbor. It's, you know, I remember hearing stories about block parties. People would have block parties just to get to know your neighbor. Yeah, every neighbor, you've got a Karen in every group. It's great. And but there's an acceptance of difference when you welcome people into community. We have to be more involved. I'm involved as much as I can be involved. I've had a lot of stuff happen in the last month in my life, and I'm still involved. I can honestly say, going into the election, I did what I could, as much as I could, with the things on my plate. Could I have done more? Okay,
We can
valid.
always do more, and that's where we have to have a healthy cap, because we can
Yeah,
always do more, but it might self-sacrifice, it might burn us out, it might, like, really, really not go well. So yes, we can always do more, but that
right.
doesn't mean we should always do more. It's finding our balance.
And it's finding community, because you're not supposed to be, I am not supposed to go out in the middle of the street with my queer flag, wave it around, and say, follow me, all the queer people. That is not what I'm supposed to do in the world. I mean,
Right.
that would be fun for a whole hot 5 minutes. But we're supposed to have community involvement. We're supposed to build relationships with all the different bio numbers and all the different ways they manifest, so that each one of us can carry what we can carry in a healthy way. Because in the metaphysical spiritual world, in the healthcare field, there's a big push right now about self-care, right? It's a big push. There's a reason for that, because we have been shamed, we have been put in this fear paradigm, and there are people that are tapped out. They're like, okay, you elected an orange Oompa Loompa again. Fine. Fuck you. I'm going to go back here and hide in my hole. Valid, because they haven't had the support from all the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really one of those things that I would challenge people, that if you know somebody who's queer or gay or brown or has a different religious belief or a different sexual identity, and they're a family member, they're a loved one, there's a friend out there, guess what? You no longer have the luxury to allow one person to stand for everything you believe in. It's now your job to step up, find community, find equity and inclusiveness in your communities, because we have to start small. Everybody's I agree. The Orange Oompa Loompa out as a president is not only embarrassing to the world, but also completely undermines so many of the things that we intrinsically, morally, ethically value. No matter who you are, you want people to be honest, you want people to be fair, you want equitable services, you want the rights to your free speech, you want your right to bear arms, you want your right to bodily autonomy, you want your right to good health care, you want the right to have a roof over your head and not have to sleep on the street. You want to not have to go paycheck to paycheck. You know, on and on and on. I don't care what party, what little mini group you belong to, we all kind of want those things.
We all want to survive and live a life of integrity and decency, and like to be allowed to love the people that we love. And it is the fear of this is part of what I've spoken about on socials right now. And I had a great conversation with a friend who's an Indigenous person yesterday. And I was like, I don't understand how we voted this way as a collective. And looking at the numbers of the majority of people who did vote, right? And she said, white women will unfortunately do whatever they can to maintain the little gains they've gotten. And it hit me so hard how true it is.
Oh yeah.
Because when you have experienced, and I'm speaking as a trauma survivor and a white woman and so many other things right here, right now, like when you've experienced trauma and you've experienced depression and you get a breath of fresh air, like you get the leg up, it's going to feel so good. Like, oh my gosh, I've got a little bit more capacity, I have a little bit more control or power in the situation. But kneeling in front of another is still not self-autonomous, no matter what we might think. And
No.
so the invitation here, because we're already seeing it on socials, I'm already seeing photos this morning of white men standing out on streets with signs about how they own women now and women's rights are going away. If you voted for Trump and that was not the ideology that you ascribe to, it is on you to speak up
To say
against that,
something.
to say
Yes.
something. Like, we do not
Yeah.
stand with the supporters that are supporting this.
Nope,
We stand
that's your
with
job.
supporters that want the better economy and all. You get to stand in your values, but yeah, we're going to expect you to be speaking up against this harm, because otherwise it doesn't take long for it to look like the Diary of Anne Frank again.
It doesn't take long. And I want to speak to that generational white woman gains thing because I lived that as a kiddo. My bio mom was very much like women's rights, women right to an abortion. Like she was all about that. But when I wanted to be involved, right, she was like, "Well, you talk a little too plainly. You're not really suited to this. Like, probably should just be quiet and just go get a job." And when there was something that happened in my life that was extraordinarily traumatic, it wasn't, do you want an abortion? It was, you will get an abortion. I no longer, in my own home, being raised by a feminist woman, have the right to process my trauma so I could fucking decide if I wanted the abortion or not.
Right.
And I did. I doubled down and said, no, I'm not going to do it. It might be my right, but then that means my right is to keep. Did I make the right choice? I have no idea. I can't take it back. It's the way it is. I have a beautiful son. And am I still going to fight for every single woman's right to their own bodily autonomy? 100%. Every person's bodily autonomy. I want to rephrase that. Every person's bodily autonomy. But this is the privilege of being the white woman who has the right to her body, then became a mandate to do something because it was available to do, to not embarrass the family and not go outside a Christian value of, I wasn't married. So I wasn't married and I wasn't going to marry my rapist. So because I wasn't going to do that, I should be forced to get the abortion, whether I wanted to or not. I was not asked. I was not asked.
Yeah.
And that is a trauma response of a white woman, Christian, who thinks she has a high moral value, right? She has good morals and ethics, right?
Yeah.
We have to stop doing this to each other. As
Yeah.
women, we have to stop doing this to each other as brothers and sisters of many cultures and many races and many identifying factors. They're all over the damn place. It's like trying to chase cats on crack. They're everywhere. We all have a voice. We all have a story. It's always valuable. It is all of our experiences are here to share, to grow, to support each other, to learn and become better fucking human beings.
We've got a long way to go. And that can feel daunting and overwhelming too, to realize, right? Like, I write a lot of content that calls people out. I do. And
Yeah.
that, again, that's part of my thing, is ownership and impact. And I talk about my own experiences of internalized racism and sexism
Yes.
and homophobia, because if I don't fucking look at it, I can't do anything with it. If you don't look into the
100%.
shadows and get the information out, you can't change it. And so
Mm-mm.
we're all walking around with these legacy burdens in modern American culture, and it is on us to relieve ourselves of that burden and uncouple from it and bring it into the light and go, you know what? I don't want to have this instinctual response anymore. I don't want to think this way. I don't want to think this way and let myself keep thinking this way. Right. That was like in my journey with racism. I didn't know racism was a thing until I moved to Maryland. So I grew up with no racism around my life because there weren't black people. And then there was one black family that moved in, and I befriended the little girl because we were in the same grade together, and I hadn't been introduced to racism. So there was I didn't see anything wrong with that. And then I moved to Maryland, and then I went to racist public schools and started to see it. And so that little switch just got flipped. And it was like, am I supposed to think that way? But I grappled with it, right? I was like, I didn't think this way before. Why would I think this way now? What is this doing in me?
Yeah.
And I continued to have friends and continued to grow in speaking out about those things and talking about them because I was willing to look at my shadow. And I have a much richer friend group that are authentic friends who know I didn't just sell them out because of
Right.
that. And
Yeah.
that's the issue. People probably feel sold out right now. And that's
Oh,
why
yeah.
they're angry and afraid. And there are so many. 1 in 6, this was statistics as of, I believe, 4 years ago. 1 in 6 as of 4 years ago, adult Gen Zers was queer.
Yep.
So that's the adults. The youths that are coming up are going to be even more queer. So we basically just said potentially 1 in 6 Americans is an other. And that is mind-boggling to me, period. So, we
Well,
have to keep talking about this.
we have to keep talking about it, and we also have to talk about relevance in generational education, how people have been educated. I look at my stepson. He didn't vote, and I was like, I kind of wish he had voted. And he ran out of the room. Like, he hasn't talked to me in 2 days. And that one statement triggered the disappointment piece. And
Uh-huh.
I should have phrased it differently. Totally on me. I'm going to have to eat that humble pie and have that conversation. But that's the thing we all have to do. We all have to engage all of the generations.
Mhm.
Like, I belong to the League of Women Voters locally in my chapter. I think I'm one of the youngest. I don't think I'm the youngest, but I think I'm one of the youngest. And I'm in my 50s. So I'm looking at a group of older women who, when our diversity person volunteer, it's a volunteer position, she's the diversity equity representative. She's like, hey, we need to put we need to put people's pronouns on their name tags. The entire group went, no, we don't feel like that's necessary. And the diversity person and I both went, huh? What? So I've been practicing. I've been educating and practicing a group of older women that do not understand. They don't understand the necessity. They don't understand, and granted, I'm an ex-English teacher, so I still struggle with That's why I don't use they for myself, because technically, according to the definition, I should probably be a they. But my English grammar
We're going to
piece,
talk about that on another episode because I am the queer spirit guide and I am here for all queer identities are valid. And that's a whole nother story for a whole other day. You do not have to be a they, but yes.
well, I mean, it's one of those things where I get it, and at the same time, my
You don't get
brain
it.
won't let me say it that way. It's really a grammatical how something sounds, and it's a very interesting paradigm to be in and as part of the LGBTQ plus community.
None of us are perfect.
And we're not. And so I've been using that as an opportunity with this group of older women to, when they come up and they go like, "Hey, I'm Daisy." And I go, "Well, hello, Daisy. My name is Red and I go by she, her pronouns." And I always get the like, "I don't know what to do with that. That's obvious. You're a girl." And I'm like,
Right.
"Yeah, but," and it's very interesting because I've had one-on-one conversations with different people that has definitely made people uncomfortable, right? Like some of these women have gotten very uncomfortable, and yet they keep coming back. They keep asking me questions because I make them uncomfortable. I'm not going to pussyfoot around. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to be unkind, and I'm not going to be partisan about it. But I represent in a group of women an entire population of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I can feel the weight and the responsibility of that. And I take it very seriously. So I don't want to sabotage every other person's opportunity to ever join. And at the same time, I can only do it in small tidbits because that is a lot of weight. And I welcome any and all women, and they accept men too in the organization. Join, have a voice because it's nonpartisan. But it's a small example of something that I've been working on for a year. And we cannot, looking at all the people that voted, we have to hold them accountable for what they say their morals and ethics are. We also have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to go, okay, we hoped, yay, we have hope. That's great. I did too. I expected it to happen, and I still had hope it would not happen. So now none of us have the luxury.
Right.
None of us have the luxury to continue to just quote unquote have hope and hope somebody gets rational and hope somebody becomes educated or somebody figures it out. There's so many things that are being flung around on both sides. I don't belong to any of them.
Yeah.
I don't belong to any of them. And I'm
Yeah.
not ever going to. I firmly, from my own personal perspective, think that we need to abolish all the party systems.
I agree. We
I think
absolutely can't keep
that just
doing the
needs
two
to be
thing, but
thrown in the garbage.
we need something new.
And the electoral college needs to go. Each
Yep.
person needs to vote.
Yes.
And there's more. Like, why do not women have equal rights in our amendments in the federal level, right? Montana's great. We voted to make women's right to their bodies part of our Constitution. Good job, Montana. 75% of voters went that way so far. That's amazing. And yet we put somebody in office that wants to do what Trump wants to do, which is to outlaw all abortions everywhere.
Yeah.
Did
And
no one see the contradiction?
yeah, and that's the thing. I've seen the argument like, well, he said he's not going to do that. Well, what is in potential legislation is to remove the ability for anyone to access the technology to do that. And so
Right.
even if the states had the right, if he cut off or the government cut off access to certain supplies from everybody, then that would effectively be a ban as well. So there's a lot of different angles there. And this is why, again, we need to have nuanced, educated conversations about what things actually say instead of assuming what we're told by an authority. That is one more thing, about this women's rights and women voters and this league and all of that is when I was talking to my friend the other day. She worked for Planned Parenthood, like at a political level, and did phone calls back in the early 2000s. And she said they would just ask, like, do you know who you're voting for yet? And she said about 80% of the women who would respond on the phone said, I haven't asked my husband yet.
Yep. Yep.
Your voice, every single individual person's voice matters, and no one else can determine your truth. Only you can. And so if you are coerced into a certain perspective, or you feel like I'm not allowed to think anything else, right? There's an invitation to step into something new, to know that the most important thing you can do is be authentically you and to speak your truth. And I'm disappointed on all the people who didn't vote, right? Like there is a disenfranchisement of voting right now. I have talked to so many people as a therapist and as a teacher who were like,
Mhm.
votes don't matter. It doesn't matter. Yes, it
Right?
does. We're
It
seeing
does.
that right now,
Yep.
especially with the number of people who didn't. So your voice matters, your vote matters, your perspective
100%.
matters. And again, like I'm not going to blanket hate you if you voted for
No.
Trump. I'm not currently in a state mentally and emotionally where I can hear all of the reasons why you did vote, because
Right.
I need to take a breather and regroup because I've been on the ground fighting for a long time. But I'm here to have those conversations.
Mhm.
Red and I are both like
Please.
we want
Please.
to have nuanced conversations and to hold people accountable ultimately. That means holding us accountable too. And um, right now, what we most need to do is be compassionate towards the people who are scared and help them get out of their fear. And we do that by all American people standing up and saying, I'm not going to see my brothers and sisters be harmed. I am
Right.
not going to let my brothers and sisters of this nation be harmed by anyone, including the government, if it should come to that. And I'm going to keep holding the hope that it's not going to go that way, and that all of the fears we're experiencing right now are not going to come to fruition, but we have to be prepared to take care of ourselves no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, taking care of yourself, having hope is great, but it does nothing without action. Like,
Correct.
hope is not stagnant. We talk all the time on this channel about shadow and light work, and it's not stagnant. If you think you can be in a homeostasis position and stay there forever, great on your delusion, but that's not real. And I'm going to call it what it is, not to be demeaning, but I've been there. I've been in a place where I've had to hold that homeostasis to survive, and also known like, okay, I'm gonna have to be uncomfortable to heal from this.
Yeah.
And I have hope with accountability. Okay. We know statistically the numbers right now are scary in domestic violence in our country. We know that it is getting worse. I don't want any fellow woman or anyone in a partnership of any kind to feel like they can't say what needs to be said, that they don't feel safe, that they feel trapped, that they feel unseen, that they're never going to be able to get out of a relationship. I never want to see ever again, and I know I'm going to see more of it, but it horrifies me that we would put a woman in jail for getting an abortion. I don't. I don't. I just don't. And this is one of the things that the inner tapestry, right? Like the name of our show is the inner tapestry. What is the inner struggle that you struggle with out in the world? Because we've talked about a lot of highfalutin, like, okay, life themes and vibrational frequency and what's a null void. By the way, the purple Oompa Loompa is not a null void. No matter how much everybody wants to make him a dark entity, he's not. I don't know what the hell he is, but I
The
know he's
very
not.
flawed human being.
Actually, I did see him from afar once. We could go into that, but that's a whole other thing. I've never met the man personally. I've just seen him from afar. The I mean, pretty much everybody's seen him from afar at this point. Anyway, sorry, couldn't help it. Um, but there's this every single entity, and I've said it before on the show. I've never met an evil entity. I have met a lot of entities that are very traumatized living in a human meat suit experience. So far, I haven't met anybody that's not human. So far, that could change, but so far, I will caveat that with despite interdimensional other things, that's a whole other thing. But in the Inner Tapestry series, the whole part of it is to talk about the difficult things, bringing forward the shadow so it's no longer the shadow, it's no longer scary, it's not the monster under the bed. And let's bridge the divide, hold each other accountable, hold each other up to be participants in the world that we want it to be.
Yeah.
You know, I belong to a historical recreation. I belong to a couple of historical recreation type groups. And one of my favorite groups is a group of mixed heritage people. And one of the guys, I think he's the one who started saying it. His name is Dandy Wellington, and he is an African American descendant. And he says, "Vintage style, not vintage values." Go look him up. He's hilarious. I love him. And there's a whole group of people that we all say that very much so. I mean, I have a tendency to dress up in my own style. And when people ask me, like, why would you do that? You must really like being a homemaker. Or I've had people make assumptions it's because of religion. And I'm like, historical fashion, not historical values. And in the Society for Creative Anachronism is another historical group that I belong to. And there is this perception that because we recreate the Middle Ages, we must want to go back there, like no flushing toilets, no women's rights, etc. And the hilarious part of that is that this group came out of the 60s. Like it came out of the hippies, the hippies that wanted to hang out in their backyard and dress up like princesses and dress like knights and believe in the shining knight in armor and the romanticized view of chivalry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the romanticized view of chivalry in the Western white colonial viewpoint, I'm going to clarify this, is very much do the honorable thing. Okay. When you deconstruct all of that colonial bias, you deconstruct the separateness, you start looking at the idealized view of chivalry means equitably across all races, all genders, all social strata. So you can have somebody who goes through the play fight to become the king and he's been at Walmart for 20 years. Like he's not your CEO. You might have a doctor too, but you might have somebody who's worked at Walmart. You know, like anybody can win is not a true statement, even in the SCA, but they pretend like it. And I get that because they're still deconstructing their white bias. I mean, they outlawed the swastika in the organization quite a few years ago because of the intergenerational racism that has been associated with that symbol. Because collectively, as a group of people, they got their head out of their ass, faced their white supremacy colonial bias, and went, we do not want to other people, even by accident.
Yeah.
We want to face it. Now, have they really faced it?
Working on it, hopefully.
They're working on it. I have things to say about that. But you can belong to an organization and you can still be involved and try to do better. And we have so many things about our United States colonial history that as a collective group, we're not facing it. We're not facing the things we need to face. And hence, we get a whole bunch of young guys standing out in the street with signs over their heads saying, not your choice, my choice. I'm going to expect all of you who say that you didn't vote for that to say something about it. Yep. And are you going to say something about Native American land being stolen by big oil companies? Are you going to say something about missing Indigenous women? Are you going to say something about the inequity in healthcare with Black women and childbirth? Like they're dying left and right because they're not being taken care of, because their needs are different genetically. Like we all have these differences and they're not bad. They're good. They're amazing. They help us all be unique and special and good with each other. Let's embrace that.
Fingers crossed, right? And this is why, like, yes, there's a lot of people out there right now trying to stand really firmly in the love and light and like love your neighbor. And that's the only part of the narrative. So we are here to challenge that gently. Remind you that
Yes.
the other half of the narrative is the shadow piece. And it's
Yes.
the yes, love and light. And
And
we're doing harm here. Let's get it out of the shadow, talk about it, unpack it, and do better, because whatever happens, we're in this together as we move forward. And it's, I don't want to end up in a civil war. I don't think well, there are some people that do want that because they glorify that idea and they think it's going to be fabulous cosplay.
well,
But
I
let's
mean,
not go there.
well, and that's the other illusion. There's the play acting thing, right? Like I can belong to historical recreation groups and I admit that openly out loud and recognize that there are problems, right? I lived in the South for a really long time. And unfortunately, the South, even with some of the things that over time kind of helped pull the culture of the South out of this, not completely, but tried as a collective, we tried to help each other to come out of this place. And it took a lot. I mean, my parents were teens or young adults in the 60s. My papa watched it happen. Granted, I think he watched some of it from Europe because he wasn't even in the States, but he was very pro equity, pro equality. And he still had his own views. And I would make comments and he'd go, well, have you thought about that? Right. Like he never, there were some things that to this day, I don't really know what his opinion was. He would never answer my question. He would just ask me another question. Well, have you thought about that? Here's a book to read. Because he wanted me to have my own opinions.
Yep.
He wanted me to have my own thoughts. And in the South, there is a subculture of romanticizing the Civil War and romanticizing the Confederate fight, we're the underdog fight, and not a lot of actual deep diving into the continued endemic racism that promotes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very strong subculture, and unfortunately it's something that if you look at things you on maps, you're going to have to start looking at that with some real no longer rose colored glasses. You're going to have to get uncomfortable. And I want us to have these conversations as spiritual entities in meat suits. We all have one. We all have one. Nobody's gotten away from it. We all live in and on Mother Earth's ecosystems, in and within them. I don't care if environmentalism is your hot plate. I don't care if it isn't your hot plate. I don't care if you want to call it building the economy and not ecosystem balance. I don't care what you want to call it, but we all live here. So far, I haven't met anybody that's figured out how to escape.
Yeah.
If you figured out how to escape, please let me know. I'd like to know where that doorway is because I'd like to go there. I don't care where there is, but I want to go there because I'm curious and I'm like a cat and it's a door, so I'm going to go through. I mean, we are in this together in the same planet with the same wants and needs. We all want the same things.
Yeah.
And I want to really acknowledge all of those people that are hurting right now, that are looking at somebody who's been elected by a majority. We can concede it was by a majority. And that majority says the person who is in an unsafe relationship with a man or a woman will not be able to get out because they're not going to be heard. They're not valid. A person who has deep financial insecurity is not going to come out of this. That man can't even balance his own checkbook, and he wants to balance the country. Just saying. Um, the inequity of how this person deals with bigger countries, and we're not even managing our own house very well. There's a lot of acknowledgement that needs to be had in the real world, and the acknowledgement of that spiritual entity that knows it doesn't feel right but doesn't know what to do. Trust me, you have no longer have the privilege to be silent. It is your job now. Every single person right now, their job is to stand up for the inequities. It's your job to stand up for anybody that you think doesn't have a voice, because they need that voice. And we can't run away. I'm going to just throw this out there because you and I talked about it, but I have to throw it out there. There's an assumption that we can just run away to Canada. FYI. Just in case somebody's not paying attention, the Prime Minister is cut off. There's a moratorium on visas right now in Canada. And they did this because they had a boom. They had a really big boom and a housing boom. And part of the housing boom also means their public works are overstretched and they're trying to find equilibrium. If you think you're going to run away to Canada because you don't like the United States and it's the closest neighbor, I think you're going to be mistaken. There are countries that you probably could go to that would probably welcome you. And what are you going to contribute to that culture? You can't go there and hide, because this will follow you, because this doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No, this is, the way that I ultimately describe it is that all of the shadows have come to the surface. There is no
Yes.
avoiding or denying them now because they're so in our face. And if we try to run away from it, if we have the means to run away from it, right? We have the money to up and move to another country, it doesn't stop that issue from happening to other people, or that it's happening collectively. And then how do we feel about that? Like, compassionate people aren't genuinely okay with other people still being harmed, even though they themselves aren't being harmed right now. Like, that's the kicker. And I think that's why so many people don't want to be compassionate, because they know that true compassion is a two-way street, and they're afraid that if they're compassionate to someone else, that compassion is going to be lost for them. They're going to lose out on something. And that is false. We build more in community. We are more capable together than we are separate. And yeah, we could talk about this literally all day. So we're going to begin to bring it back home.
I think I think one of the things to bring it back home to is get involved. If you feel helpless, hopeless, despairing, if you feel wrung out, unsafe, there's a lot of safe conversations going on. Find safety. Always find your safety. I want you to find safety. And hold the people around you accountable. I'm not going to unfriend somebody on my social media because I found out that they voted for the Orange Oompa Loompa. I'm not going to unfriend them. I'm going to hold them accountable.
Yeah. Yeah, see,
that's
that
my
was
job.
My discernment was, oh, do I actually know you, or is this just me figuring out the kind of ideology that you might have, and I've really never spoken to you before, and I don't have the energy or the spoons to give you my labor, so I'm going to unfriend you. But if we genuinely have a connection, you are my person to try and have this discourse with. You are my person that I am here to help see another perspective of inclusion and impact, and again, that none of us are safe if
No.
only some of us are safe. And white women, you're
Right.
not safe.
No.
Go look at the pictures of Texas right now. Like,
Yeah.
Texas, one of the universities down there. If you think you're safe because of the choice you made, think again.
Yeah, you're not safe. And I will say that I'm a bit of a radical. I've been radical my whole life. I will admit that. I'll fall on that sword. I have been the open minded, radical catalyst my whole life. I can't keep my mouth shut. I'm just going to say the thing. And I'm not ashamed of it either. Sometimes I kind of wonder if maybe that hurt a little too much and I should have said that a little differently. I'll own that. I'll totally own that. But I will wear that star that you have just pinned on my breast, and I will wear that with pride because that means it's in your face and I'm going to hold you accountable. I will do that. And I will also recognize that not everybody can do that, and I'm okay with that. I want my people to be safe. But I also know that I look like I have privilege, so I'm going to use it. I'm going to manipulate the fuck out of that.
That's exactly it. I'm like, I am a white person, and I also have other intersections of non-privilege, but I don't spend my time going, well, I can't help because of my I have some, so I'm going to use what I can. If you have any privilege right now,
use it.
You are being initiated into trying to use it in a different way than you maybe have in the past. And that was the other thing. We're pulling it all back full circle. Many of you feel initiated right now and you're not happy about that. And I totally get it and hear you and welcome. And we didn't hope for this, right? Again, going back to that hope, but here's where we're at. So we're going to do what we can do. If you are tired, if you are worn, if you need a break, if you can't fight the fight right now, if you can't hold people accountable, that's okay. Sit down and rest and take care of you, because the most important thing we can do is resource ourselves right now so that we can do something. And, you know, I saw so many people literally like watching videos of Gaza and being so depressed and so demoralized that they then had to lay in bed for days and days and days and couldn't function because they'd seen such atrocities.
Yep.
That's not taking care of yourself and being able to have an impact. It is giving, like, it's working as intended, honestly, because they want you to have no power to do anything and fight back against atrocities. So the activism is in pleasure. The activism is in rest. The activism is in taking care of you in a way you've never taken care of you before, so that you are grounded, resourced, and able to have the impact that you're here to make. Nothing else is expected of you. Like, you're not here to make an impact that's not yours to make, but you are here to have an impact. So let it be the one that you came here to make, rather than one that's out of fear. That's the invitation.
And you're not alone. There always will be community. And that doesn't have to be along a party line. It doesn't have to be an othering group. We've got to reframe. We've got to reframe this, guys. And the only way we can reframe this is from a self-healed place. And that's not going to be in a straight line. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of this last week, last 3 weeks, actually. I mean, trigger central. I'll own that 100%. I mean, I told Safrianna before we joined, I was like, I woke up this morning going, I don't know what spoons I have. I don't know what we're going to talk about, because I wasn't sure last night what I had it for. But I woke up this morning and I had the fire, but it's not always there. And I know that you have to take care of yourself. The inner tapestry of the light and the shadow, that's what we work on here. And we're real about it. We're going to untangle it. And we will do as much as we need to help you find that community. I know Safrianna's got resources. I could find some. I'm not really good at that, but I can find some. I can try. But we have to do ourselves, find our voice, and find the community where it's safe to have that voice and support each other. Yeah. We can't do it all. Safrianna cannot hold the world. I cannot hold the world. I don't even try. I'm just trying to like get people to do shit. Just do shit. Please do shit.
You're trying to catalyze as you do. Yes. So friends, if this is your first time tuning in, again, this is episode 20. So there are a whole nother 19 episodes of us talking about the shadow and light journey through a variety of different lenses, different systems, different blueprint aspects. Go back and watch if you feel like it. They're all on YouTube. There's a playlist. And we'll be back in another 2 weeks. So if there is something that you're really wanting us to dive into, of course, we have a list of topics that are kind of on the back burner. This was obviously like, okay, we're bumping the program out because we need to talk about this. But if there
Yeah.
are follow up things to this that you'd like to hear or more
Yeah.
nuanced perspectives, let us know. We're here for you.
I love
So,
nuance. I
yeah.
love to talk about the little
The
things.
little, well, do
The
you see
little
how
things.
this versus this?
The
And
little
yeah.
things. Brings me joy.
So, yes, until next time, friends, thank you as always. Red will be back in 2 weeks. Until next
Breathe.
time.
See you soon.